Okay, so this is the third segment of the audio version of your reading homework. So this is the third segment, pages 60 to 66. So just a reminder, don't forget to do your annotations. Again, if you need the format, look at the assignment sheet I gave you. But we're just going to go ahead and start on. Okay, page 60. He'd have said more, maybe, but up came Kopchik, a Ukrainian lad, pink as a suckling pig, to complain that the other squad wouldn't give them the box. There was a scrap going on over it. So off went Tyran. Difficult as it was to start working in such cold, the important thing was to get going. Shukov and Kilgus exchanged looks. They had worked as a team more than once as carpenter and mason, and had come to respect one another. It was no easy matter to find something to board up those windows within the bare expanse of snow, but Gilgas said, Vanya, I know a little place over there where these prefabs are going up with a fine roll of roofing felt. I put it aside with my own hands. Let us go and scrounge it. Gilgas was a Let, but he spoke Russian like a native. There had been a settlement of old believers near his village, and he had learned Russian from childhood. He had been in camp for only 2 years, but already he understood everything. If you don't use your teeth, you get nothing. His name was Johann, and Shukov called him Vanya. They decided to go for the roll, but first Shukov ran over to where a new wing of the repair shops was under construction. He had to get his trowel. For a mason, a trowel is a serious matter, if it's light and easy to handle. But there was a rule that wherever you worked, you had to turn in every evening the tools you'd be issued that morning, and which tool you got the next day was a matter of chance. One evening, though, Shukov had fooled the man in the tool store and pocketed the best trowel. And now he kept it hidden in a very different place every evening and every morning. If he was put to laying blocks, he recovered it. If the 104th had been sent into the socialist way of life settlement that morning, Shukov would of course have been without a trowel again. But now he had only to push aside a brick, dig his fingers into the chink, and presto, there it was. Shukov and Gilgas left the repair shops and walked over toward the prefabs. The breath formed thick clouds of vapor. The sun was now some way above the horizon, but it cast no rays as in a fog. On each side of it rose pillars of light. Like poles, eh? Shukov said with a nod. It's not poles we have to worry about, said Kilgus casually, so long as they don't put any barbed wire between them. He never spoke without making a joke. That Kilgus was popular with the whole squad for it. And what a reputation he had already won for himself among the Lets in the camp. Of course, it was true he ate properly. He received 2 food parcels a month, and looked as ruddy as if he wasn't in camp at all. You would make jokes if you were in his shoes. This construction site covered an immense area. It took quite a long time to cross it. On their way, they ran into men from 82nd. Again, they had given the job of chopping out holes in the ground. The holes were small enough, 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet, and about the same in depth. But the ground, stone hard, even the summer, was now in the grip of frost. Just try and gnaw it. They went for it with picks. The picks slipped, scattering showers of spark, but not a bit of earth was dislodged. The men stood there, one to a hole, and looked about them. Nowhere to warm up, they were forbidden to budge a step, so back to the pick, the only way to keep warm. Shukov recognized one of them, a fellow from Vyatka. Listen, he advised him, you'd do better to light a fire over each hole. The ground would thaw out then. It's forbidden, said the man. They don't give us any firewood. Scrounge some then. Kilgus merely spat. How do you figure it, Vanya? If the authorities had any guts, do you think they'd have men pounding away at the ground with pickaxes in a frost like this? He muttered a few indistinguishable oaths and fell silent. You don't talk much in such cold. They walked on until they reached the spot where the panels of the prefabs lay buried under snow. Shukov liked to work with Kilgas. The only bad thing about him was that he didn't smoke and there was never any tobacco in his parcels. Kilgas was right. Together they lifted a couple of planks, and there lay the roll of roofing felt. They lugged it out. Now how were they going to carry it? They'd be spotted from the watchtowers, but that didn't matter. The parrot's only concern was that the prisoners should not escape. Inside, you could chop up all those panels into firewood for all they cared. Nor would it matter they happened to meet one of the guards. He'd be looking about like the others to see what he could scrounge. As for the prisoners, they didn't give a damn for those prefabs, and neither did the squad leaders. The only people who kept an eye on them were the superintendent, who was a civilian, that bastard Durer, and the lanky Shrugopatenko, a mere goose egg, a trustee who had been given the temporary job of guarding the prefabs from any stealing by the prisoners. Yes, It was Shukov of Tinko, who was likely to spot them on the open ground. Look here, Vanya, said Shukov. We mustn't carry it lengthwise. Let's take it up on end with our arms around it. It'll be easy to carry and our bodies will hide it. They won't spot it from a distance. It was a good idea. To carry the roll lengthwise would have been awkward, so they held it upright in between them and set off. From a distance, it would look as if there were three of them, rather close to one another. But when Dur notices the felt on the windows, he'll guess where it came from, said Shukov. What's it got to do with us? Asked Kilgaz in surprise. We'll say it was there before. Were we to pull it down or what? That was true. Shukov's fingers were numb with cold under his worn mittens. He had lost all sense of touch. But his left boot was holding. That was the main thing. The numbness would go out of his fingers when he started to work. They crossed the stretch of virgin snow and reached the sled trail from running from the tool store to the power station. Their men must have brought the cement along there. No power station stood on the rise at the edge of the site. No one had ever been near the place for weeks, and the approaches to it lay under a smooth blanket of snow. The sled tracks and the fresh trails that had been left by the deep footsteps of the 104th stood out boldly. The men were already clearing away the snow from around the building with wooden shovels and making a road for the trucks to drive up on. It would have been good if the mechanical lift in the power station had been in order, but the motor had burned out and no one had bothered to repair it. This meant that everything would have to be carried by hand to the second story, the mortar and the blocks. For 2 months, the unfinished structure had stood in the snow like a gray skeleton, just as it had been left, and now the 104th had arrived. What was it that kept their spirits up? Empty bellies? Fastened tight with belts of rope? A splitting frost? Not a warm corner, not a spark of fire, but the 104th had arrived, and life had come back to the building. Right at the entrance to the machine room, the trough for mixing mortar fell apart. It was a makeshift affair, and Shukov hadn't expected it to last a journey in one piece. Tyran swore at his men, just for form's sake, for he saw that no one was to blame. At that moment, Kilgaz and Shukov turned up with their roll of roofing felt. Tyran was delighted, and at once worked out a new arrangement. Shukov was to put to fixing the stovepipe, so that a fire could be quickly kindled. Kilgaz was to repair the mixing trough, with the 2 Estonians to help him. And Senka was given an axe to chop long laths with felt could be tacked to them, 2 widths for each window. Where were the laths to come from? Tyran looked around. Everybody looked around. There was only one solution: to remove a couple of planks that served as a sort of handrail on the ramp leading up to the second story. You'd have to keep your eyes peeled going up and down, otherwise you'd be over the ledge. But where else were the laths to come from? Why, you might wonder, should prisoners wear themselves out working hard 10 years on end in the camps? You'd think they'd say, "No, thank you," and that's that. We'll drag ourselves through the day till evening, and then the night is ours. But that didn't work. To outsmart you, they thought up work squads, but not squads like the ones outside the camps, where every man is paid a separate wage. Everything was so arranged in the camp that the prisoners egged one another on. It was like this: either you all got a little bit extra, or you all got croaked. You're loafing, you bastard. Do you think I'm willing to go hungry just because of you? Put your guts into it, Slav. And if a situation like this one turned up, there was all the more reason for resisting any temptation to slack. Regardless, you put your back into the work, for unless you could manage to provide yourself with the means of warming up, you and everyone else would give out on the spot. So guys, hopefully you picked up on that. So they arranged the camp to where every man is pretty much forced to work. Like if one man doesn't work, his whole group would go hungry. So they set up the squads, they set up like the groups, so that way everybody would really strive to work their best, otherwise they wouldn't survive. So let's just keep going. Pavla brought the tools with them, now use them. A few lengths of stovepipe too. True, there were no tinsmith's tools, but there was a little hammer and a light axe. One could manage. Shukov clapped his mittens together, joined up the lengths, and hammered the ends onto the joints. He clapped his hands together and repeated his hammering. He'd hidden his trowel in a nearby crack in the wall. Although he was among his own men, one of them might swap it for his own. That applied to Gilgaz too. And then every thought was swept out of his head. All his memories and worries faded. He had only one idea: to fix the bend in the stovepipe and hang it up to prevent it smoking. He sent cop pitch for a length of wire, hang up the pipe near the window with it. That would be best. In the corner there was another stove, a squat one with a brick chimney. It had an iron plate on top that grew red hot, and sand was to be thawed and dried on it. This stove had already been lit, and the captain and Fitikov were bringing up barrows of sand. You don't have to be very bright to carry a hand barrow, so the squad leader gave such work to people who had been in positions of authority. Fitikov had been a big shot in some office with a car at his disposal. At first, Fitikov had spat on the captain, bawled at him, but one punch on the jaw was enough. They got on all right after that. The men bringing in the sand were edging over to the stove to warm up, but Tyrion drove them off. Look out. One of you is going to catch it in a hurry. Wait till we've got the place fixed up. You've only to show a whip to a beaten dog. The frost was severe, but not as severe as the squad leader. The men scattered and went back to their jobs. And Chukov heard Tyrion said to Pavlo, "Stay here and keep them at it. I'm going to hand in the work report." More dependent on the work report than on the work itself. A clever squad leader was one who concentrated on the work report. That was what kept the men fed. He had to prove that work which hadn't been done had been done, to turn jobs that were rated low into ones that were rated high. For this, a squad leader had to have his head screwed on, and to be on the right side of the inspectors. Their palms had to be greased too. Okay, so guys, when they mention their palms had to be greased, that means bribery. Okay, so like your squad leader had to bribe the inspectors so that way you could get fed and have, decent conditions. So just FYI there. Their palms had to be greased too. But who benefited then from all those work reports? Let's be clear about it. The camp. The camp got thousands of extra rubles from the building organization and so could give higher bonuses to its guard lieutenants, such as to Volkovo for using his whip. And you got an extra 6 ounces of bread for your supper. A couple of ounces ruled your life. 2 buckets of water were carried in, but they had frozen on the way. Pavlo decided that there was no sense in doing it like this. Quicker to melt snow, they stood the buckets on the stove. Kopchik brought along with some new aluminum wire used for electric leads. Ivan Denisovich, he said as he turned it over to Shukov, "It's good for making spoons. Teach me how to cast them." Shukov was fond of the kid. His own son had died young, and the 2 daughters he had left at home were grown up. Kopchik had been arrested for taking milk to the forest for Bandera's men, and had been given an adult's term of imprisonment. He was like a puppy and he fawned on everyone. But he had already learned cunning. He ate the contents of his food packages alone, sometimes during the night. After all, you couldn't feed everyone. They broke off a length of wire for the spoons and hid it in the corner. Shukov knocked together a couple of planks into a stepladder and sent Kopchik up to hang the stovepipe. The boy, as nimble as a squirrel, climbed up into the beams, pounded in a nail or two, slipped the wire around them, and passed it under the pipe. Shukov didn't begrudge him his energy. He made another bend in the pipe close to the end. Though there was a little wind that day, there might be plenty tomorrow, and this bend would prevent the pipe from smoking. Alright guys, that's the end of your reading homework. Go ahead and do your annotation. God bless you and have a great day.